Hello, everyone. I'm Len Bruskowitz. I'm joined by two colleagues, Steve Kent and Pete Heyman, and we are going to talk today for about a half hour about three big topics in terms of end game planning. We're going to talk about the business side, the financial side, and the personal side. A couple of things of note: if you have questions during the session, you can submit those via chat, and we will address them all at the end of our presentations. One other note is that we will be sending the recording out to everybody who registered for the event. So you can trust that there will be the recording for everybody, even those who may have registered and not able to make it. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to talk about the business side of endgame planning. And no further ado, I'm going to talk about what the challenges are for business owners. And really, this is the current landscape. Fully almost a third of business owners in the US don't understand what their exit options are. And if you're in that 30% right now, by the end of this presentation, you're going to be in the 70% because I'm going to walk through what the most common exit options are for business owners. The next thing is that 26% of business owners haven't done any exit planning at all, which is kind of worrisome. Again, I'm going to talk about some things to ways to get started. Almost 60% don't have a written transition plan. Again, it's great if you have a plan in your head, but if something happens to you, you know, it's, nobody else will know what that plan is. So it's really important to get a written plan. And two-thirds haven't formed a formal transition advisory team. Steve and Pete are logical people to be part of that transition team. May also be your CPA, your business lawyer. There are some other folks that would be involved as well, but really important to have a good team around you as you go through this process. And why does it matter? Because about 80% of an owner's financial assets are tied up in their business. And unless you have a great transition plan that you actually implement, you're never going to be able to harvest those assets. And so that will have a big impact on what you want to do next. And it's super important because about 50% of the business transitions in the US happen involuntarily. And those happen because of we call them the 5 Ds: death, disability, disagreement, divorce, and distress. Most of those are self explanatory, but what that means is because in a lot of cases there's no plan, when one of those things happens, a death or a divorce or disability, the company has to be sold. And that typically doesn't happen for a great price. And the next stat is that 75% of owners regret selling after 1 year. There are a number of reasons for this. One of these is, they just don't think they got enough for their company. So the valuation was too low. Another is that business owners have a really tough time separating from their business. And a big part of exit planning is helping you as a business owner get independence from your company. And then the other stat is that a quarter of the companies that go up for sale actually sell. The other 75% don't. What happens to those businesses? The owner keeps running them or they just shut down. Now, what are the biggest reasons? A couple of them are there's just an unreal expectation of how much the business is worth. The same as the regret that that the business owner hasn't really come to terms with leaving their business. And so, a lot of times they get cold feet at the end. And so if you have this great plan and have got independence, you're going to have a much higher likelihood that your business is going to sell. So what's your business worth? Today, the most common methodology is the one I have bolded, the income approach. And this is basically a multiple of your EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization as adjusted. So that's a fancy way of saying your net income of what your business is generating, plus there's some add backs to that. And then it's multiplied by a multiple, which is kind of what then you go from your income to how much the company is worth. So that's the most common methodology for figuring out a business valuation. But in the future, it's really dependent on what are your needs or wants. Do you want to start something new? Do you want to retire? Whatever your plan is, you can then by implementing a value acceleration plan, value creation plan, you can you can get to that number where you want it to be. So you can increase your multiple so that when you go to sell the business, you're getting what you want for it and what you expect for it. I'm going to walk through a little bit of an example of how business value is assigned. And this is really from the buyer's perspective. So you need to be aware of it because this is who you're going to be dealing with. So about 20% of the value of a company is based on what you can see from the outside. How vibrant is your industry? Are you a leader or a follower in your industry? What's your reputation? So those are the things you can see from outside, but it's only a fifth of the value. 80% or four-fifths of the value really comes from how prepared the business is. And that you can only see from the inside. And this is the kind of the four C's. There's structural capital, which is, are your processes documented? Can somebody come in and run your company when you're not there? Are your metrics in place and are they understood? So you really know what the drivers of your business are. If you think about customers, do you have a diverse customer base, or is all of your revenue concentrated in only a couple customers that if they went away, your business would basically collapse? And is your revenue predictable, or is it kind of one time and really lumpy? On the social capital side, this is really about your culture. And are you, as the owner, independent from your business, or are you required to make every decision? Um, and independence is good. You having to make every decision, not so good. And then human capital. How strong is your team? Do they have experience? Do they have know-how? A good balance of people who are long-term employees with some new blood as well is always the best. And really, what it comes down to is that value is defined as the future growth of cash flows divided by one plus the risk associated with that future growth. And it's a relatively simple formula, but it's really hard to put an exact number on it until you kind of go through all of the components on the right side of this slide. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of an example here. And so I'm going to talk about gaps. And gaps are, in the first case, is I'm going to walk through a profit gap. So this is an average company, and they're generating $5 million of revenue a year, and they're at 10% profit. So they're generating about $500,000 of profit a year. But the best in class company on that same amount of revenue is generating $1 million of profit. So that yields a profit gap of about a $500,000. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, but clearly if you had a 500,000 more profit on the same revenue, that's a good thing. But if you go over and talk about then how that yields in terms of the value of the company, if you have company A who has that 500 million or $500,000 profit, they may yield, because of all the other things in their company, about a 2x multiple. And so when they would go to sell, they would sell for about $1 million. But if you take that best in class company, which is generating $1 million, and that's because they have those four C's humming, right? They've got great human capital, customer capital. They might get a 4x multiple. Now that company is worth $4 million rather than 1 million. So you can see that multiples matter. And so getting to best in class and optimizing those four C's on my prior slide can really generate a significant increase or a significant difference in the value of your company. So I talked about exit options. I'm going to cover 5 of the most common. The first one is passing to a family member, a succession plan, right? It may be children, it may be nieces, nephews, maybe in-laws, whatever, but passing to a family member is a great exit option. It does have some risks to it, but that is one option. The next one is selling to a third party. This is what you'd commonly think of, I'm selling my company. And there are 3 kinds of buyers. There's an individual buyer, somebody who just wants to come in and run the business. There's a strategic buyer, somebody who really values and thinks that they can get a much greater value out of buying your company and potentially combining it with another one. Or a PE firm, right? Private equity firms buy up lots of businesses, and they'll tend to buy up a lot of businesses in the same industry, for example. So those are selling to a third party is a viable option. Merging with a partner or competitor, that happens quite a bit. Selling to management or employees, you may have heard of ESOPs or employee sales to employees or management. Or there's always the option to just shut down and liquidate the assets. So now you can put yourself in the 70% category and know what your exit options are. And I'll end with kind of what to think about now. There are really four quadrants that you should start thinking about, even if you haven't done any exit planning. The first one, and Pete's going to talk about this more, is really what are your personal plans? What's your next great adventure? That could be volunteering, starting a nonprofit, running another business. One of the key things to do though is to discuss this with your family of what you want to do next, because your family may not know, and it's always better to communicate that. And at the same time, building your advisory team, getting those pieces in place is super important. Next is the business strategy. When you're getting ready to transition, what you really want to do is focus on what makes you best and get rid of the things that maybe aren't as profitable. You also want to minimize risks. So you want to kind of take out the places in your business that could cause it to go downhill. That may be expanding your customer base. And you want to have growth plans because companies will pay more for businesses that are growing. On the processes side, yeah, understand your metrics, document your processes. And this doesn't need to be boring, writing a lot of stuff. You can do videos to document how your company works. Get your finance and accounting in order, right? This may mean, you know, taking a really serious look at who you're using for your bookkeeping and accounting, because it's a huge importance to have your books in order. And then start to think about tax planning. There are things you can do with advance warning to minimize your taxes after a sale, but you can't do them too late. You've got to be up and ahead of it. And then on the management side, you really want to get that independence. Start to make the business so that you don't have to be there running it. Little fringe benefit of that is you can take a vacation if there are other people that can fill in. And you want to build those people underneath you. And you may have a small team now, but you need to be able to figure out who can take over and do things once you're not there. And then what I showed in that example, you really want to focus on profitability, because multiples of earnings is what is the best way to leverage your company. And so I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Steve Kent.
Hey, thank you, Len. That was some awesome information. I know I learned a lot, so thank you for that. So, we want to talk for a few minutes about what to consider when you're planning for your financial future, because it's not just that you're in your business now, but what happens when you exit the business? How do you maintain that same financial lifestyle when the income may not be the same? Next slide, please. So, we're going to talk for a few minutes on what is financial freedom. Everybody has their own version of it, but let me just give you some high level things to think about as you go through the various stages of business and post business. So, what are you doing now to protect you and your business financially? One of the big things that businesses should have, if there are two or more partners, is something called a buy sell agreement. And in most cases, businesses do have this. And if you don't, you really should have one, because it identifies the roles and responsibilities of each party, of each partner. But as Len said earlier, one of those D's is death. What happens if one of those partners should die? That portion goes to somebody else outside the business. But the existing remaining partners want to have control of the entire business. So the buy sell agreement says, I'm going to buy that piece from the person who passed away. And that's great. But where do you get the money to buy that piece? In some cases, people are taking money from their retirement or personal savings, which could work, but long term, it's not the ideal situation. Then, is your business legally and financially separate from your personal assets? When I had my business, and what worked for me was a subchapter S, because that kept the legal side separate from me personally. So if something happened and somebody came after the business, they couldn't attack me or attach my assets. But I did have the income and the revenue passed through to me for myself. So that's something to consider. It could be a subchapter S, could be an LLC or something else. Definitely talk to your CPA about that. And do you have a trust in place? While wills are great, they can be contested. Trusts cannot. So again, see an attorney, have a trust in place so that whenever you do exit the business, your true wishes are taken into account and everything will go the right way. So when it comes to your goals, and this is again, while you have the business and post, how are you taking into account the following things? Are you saving for retirement? Now, again, if your business is 80% of your wealth, what are you doing now to set yourself up for later when that 80% may not be there? Are you eliminating any debt now? So, again, you need less to live on later. How do you account for a change of environment? Are you going to stay in the same state? Are you going to buy a different house? Are your aging, ailing parents going to come and live with you? All those things change your environment and may change your need for finances. Do you have the need to potentially earn more money down the road? How do you set yourself up for that? Will you have to take care of a loved one? Could be a partner, a child, a parent. How are you going to control your time? And Pete's going to talk a little bit about this. How do you control your time now that you're no longer in a business 50, 60, 70 hours a week? How do you put money away if you want to travel the world? I know I always did. And my plan is 3 years from now, when I turn 70, I'm going to travel the world and I'm going to let my business run by itself because I don't want to be the one, as Len said, you don't want to be the one that has to make all the decisions. And what if you had to fund somebody's education, a partner, a child, a grandchild? Where does that money come from? These are some of the goals and things to start thinking about now to set yourself up later. Now, one of the things, or some of the things to consider, are what I call the four enemies of money: taxes, inflation, losses, and indecision. Now, a lot of people say, I earn money, I have to pay taxes. And basically, I'm SOL, whatever the tax rate is, I have to pay. And you can get a little creative, but for the most part, you want to stay out of jail and pay the taxes that you're supposed to be paying. But I'm here to tell you that there are vehicles out there that will allow you to pay less taxes or no taxes. And in that position, when the tax rates likely will go up, you really don't care what the taxes are because you're not going to pay any taxes. So that's something to think about. From an inflation perspective, people say, you know what? Inflation is here. It's never going to go away. I can't beat it. And that's true. You can't. However, where are your investments right now and in the future? If you have your investments in a bank earning 1 or 2% and inflation is 3, 4%, you're guaranteed to lose money. So can you find a place that allows you to earn more, that is safe, that you can at least keep pace or beat inflation? A lot of people say, I'm in the market. That's what common theory says. That's what we're all told. Go into the market. And a lot of people, a lot of investment advisors will say to you, put money in and let it ride, and you'll get your money back later. In theory, you might get your money back later, but how long will you have to wait if the market does take a dive? In 2008, the market went down 50%. How many years did it take to get your money back just to where you started, let alone have profits along the way? But if you had a vehicle or knew of a vehicle that could allow you to rise when the market rises, but not participate in the downside of the market, that's a win. And that's something that, should be looked into. And from an indecision perspective, we are bombarded every day from 100 different sources about all types of vehicles and investments and all kinds of stuff. And what happens is there is so much information that we are paralyzed by doing all the analysis. But it can be a look through and analyze so that we can make sense out of it so that people can make sense, can make more informed decisions. So it's not out of control. So, how do you overcome these financial enemies? And there are things that you can do, such as let's talk about taxes for a moment. The blue bars are ideal, and let me explain that. On the left-hand side are what I call taxed now. So any income you make this year, your salary, your W-2, your stock market, your crypto, anything you make this year, you pay taxes on it this year. The middle graph is deferred. It's taxed later. So that means you pay no tax now, but you do pay tax later. Those are like your 401ks, your IRAs, and some other vehicles, 457s. So you don't pay tax now, you defer it until later. And everybody puts their money in there, but here's the challenge. You defer it now, but you're going to pay later on a tax rate that you don't know what that tax is going to be. What also happens is you're deferring it now, but when you start taking money out, 100% of what you take out in retirement is taxable. You will pay more down the road than you're putting away in a deferred status now. So consider that. On the right-hand side is tax advantaged. That means you put money in after tax money now. It does grow tax deferred, but when you take the money out, it's 100% tax free. So it does not matter what the tax rate is, it's tax free. Those are the three options. And again, keep in mind what your appetite is to pay taxes. Next slide, please. So another thing is, what do losses mean to you? So if you had a choice of either growth, a reasonable rate of return, income for life, or principal protection, which one would you choose? Or what would happen if you could have all of them? You could grow your money, get a reasonable return, have income for life, and have principal protection. That's something, again, to consider. Not a lot of people know about this, and typically the people that do know are the very, very wealthy. My job is to help everybody else know what this is. So these are had potential things to talk about or think about when it comes to losses. And the next slide is, what can we do about the indecision piece? So think about, what are your time frames? Do you want to do something today, next week, next month, 10 years? What are your goals? And don't limit yourself. Really think, what are your goals? What can I strive for? What's your appetite to pay taxes? Again, do you want to pay taxes now, later, or never? What's your risk tolerance for losses? Just because you're in the market does not mean you have to go along with those losses. And what's your ideal post-business income? So if you're making 100 grand today, do you want that same 100 grand a year down the road? Do you want 50? Do you want 200? What are the ideal income for you down the road? And the way to figure out all this out is to work with an independent, licensed professional to assist you. And the reason I say licensed is everybody has an Uncle Joe. But what is their experience? What is their vested stake in you being successful? That's why I stress the licensed professional. All right, I want to turn it over now to Pete. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Len. Wow, that's such great information that both of you covered. Really powerful. And I think our collective message is really plan and think, and don't do it alone. So an important piece of this whole transition, legacy, endgame planning is that knowing that every stage can present, every age and stage of life can present challenges and transitions, including what I call the fourth quarter of life. And maybe it's the third quarter or it's the fourth quarter, depending on your age. that you face these things about your business. And each stage presents also possibilities and opportunities, including the fourth quarter. It's not over. It could be just beginning for engagement, enrichment, personal growth, fulfillment. And that's true of the fourth quarter as any other time. Plan, think, talk to the people that have the knowledge and that care about you. Next. Here's something I'd like you to think about. If you're in that fourth quarter or end game planning of your business, just know you've served others your whole business life, your whole professional life. You've served your team, you've served your organization, you've served your clients. Now is the time to begin to serve your needs. And how about your needs first? Maybe the first time in your professional life you have that ability to think of yourself. I like to say, be your own client now. Think of you and your needs and what will serve them. After all, you've earned it and you deserve it. Next. Now, as for me, just to identify myself, I'm a career and life coach, and I provide guidance, mentoring for people through all ages and stages of life. And as I mentioned before, every age and stage can present challenge and challenges. Sometimes we get stuck in those challenges, and that's true of this end game planning or fourth quarter of life with your business. Don't let it be a surprise to you. Think about it, plan. And my role is to help people find the possibilities and the opportunities beyond the challenges that maybe you feel stuck about. You can always do some thinking, planning, talking to see how you get through those challenges. And the fourth quarter of life, or the end game planning as we're talking about today, it's no exception. Now is a great time. It's a wonderful time to plan your emotional well-being. So as you plan your business strategies for your end game and your financial needs and your legacy, don't neglect your personal life. That's so important. Next. Here are some steps that I use with some of my clients. Not all the time, but sometime. I'd like you to be thinking about them. And what I like to call this is taking a personal inventory. And this works at any age and stage of life, but we're talking about that third or fourth quarter of life with the end game of your business. Create your skills lists. Identify the strengths, capabilities, skills, and talents that you've acquired over the years. And it doesn't need, and when you're doing this list, you don't have to prioritize them. It's just get all your strengths, your skills, your capabilities, and talents down in a full list. Then do something that some people laugh about, but it's really helpful. Create your lovable list. What makes you lovable? And what I mean by that is, what makes people want to be with you, want to spend time with you, want to be in your sphere? And then also create your passions lists. What are the things you love to do most? It's just as important at this stage of life as any other stage of life. Next. This is a Venn diagram exercise that helps us at any stage of life find that core, that center, that purpose, that life purpose. And it starts with this 4 concentric circles. The things you love to do, the things you do well, the things the world needs, and the things that the world will pay for. Now, maybe at this phase of life, you're not that interested in the pay, but maybe you are. And then you find when you do this exercise, you find your purpose or the repurpose of your life. Next. Next, please. And just remember, it's never too late to look at what is getting in your own way. You look at some fears, limited or scarcity thinking that's going on, negative patterns of behavior or habits. And you can practice with work, with planning, with working with someone that knows you well, someone like a coach or a family member, changing those negative patterns and habits into positive behaviors that will serve you. At this stage of life, you should really be thinking about surrounding yourself in positivity, surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, who support you, who uplift you, and also the activities that bring you purpose and fulfillment. Take time for yourself at this time of planning to replenish and enrich your life and enrich your soul. Next. And another exercise I do with some of my clients is what I call the whole life grid, or, ladies and gentlemen, this is your life. And you take, there's nothing magical about 9 squares, but that's a good way to start. You start with 9 squares of your life. These are the segments of your life, the areas of your life that are important to you. This is just an example. It might be contribution, hobby, leisure, personal growth. Maybe alone time is really important for you. Maybe it's more increasingly important. Your family life, your work life, your relationship, your friends. You do this at different stages of your life, including this end game planning, to see what's important to you. And then within each box, you list the things that bring these areas that are important to you to life. And you can almost look at it like a to-do list, things you want to attend to. What are the hobbies that really turn you on? What's important about your alone time? Do you like to read? Do you like to draw? Do you like to walk? Do you like to hike? Those kinds of things. And then you create the life that you want and almost have it as a checklist to stay in touch with and to stay on top of things. So after you do that, moving along, next. Together we can explore how you can prepare for this 4th quarter stage of life, or end game planning. And when I say together, do that with someone like Len, someone like Steve, someone like myself, and attend to the important areas of your life, financially with your business legacy, but don't forget emotionally as well. And by building on the positives in your life, what you most want to do moving forward, you can make this 4th quarter of life fulfilling, satisfying, productive, and a whole lot of fun. And if you do this planning and you do this forethought about it, then you don't have to worry about that SOL that Steve was talking about. Your 4th quarter can be a great time to shine your light and enjoy. Thank you. So here's a slide for those of you who are still with us. You can click, and if you're interested in what each of us has had to say and want to explore further, we're all open to team up with you and support you as you move forward.